I'm sure Sunday didn't go quite the way you were hoping. I guess to start with, like, what do you think went wrong with the run game in terms of not being able to really generate anything consistent?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think that's always the case when you struggle in an area like that, especially one you've been really good at over the course of the season. It's a combination of execution, scheme, timing. Some things they did on defense. It's a really good group, especially up front. Gave us some problems. So, something we're going to get figured out very quickly, but certainly not where we wanted to be on Sunday.
I asked Jonah after the game, and he said that there were maybe some things that they did that were maybe a little surprising, but not necessarily things you weren't prepared for. Was it a change from what they had put on film for you most of the season?
Yes and no. It's a little bit of what we talked through going into the week. Like, I think coming out of the bye, whatever that was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think they simplified a lot of things they did. So you were just seeing less defense and a little bit more execution-based, a line assignment, not as much communication where they were kind of getting lined up and going to play. But nothing outside of things they hadn't done on tape, probably just less volume.
Is that, do you think, a strategy, or was that a strategy because of all the big division moves coming up?
I would love to know, like, if we could get a very concrete answer to that from Mike McDonald, that would be very helpful for the future. But no, I don't know. I certainly noticed that, pretty early in the game, and saw that going into the game a little bit, as we talked about.
You guys probably didn't run the ball as consistently as you wanted to in the Miami game, but you were able to kind of overcome. At what point are you, is that a conversation during the game where, like, okay, we're going to have to lean more on passing the ball because it's not happening? Or is that not an actual out loud kind of thing, and it's just how the offense morphs?
Probably a little bit more of the latter. I think as a staff, we have those conversations throughout the course of the game. But generally, it's not going to be a big conversation unless it's 1,000% scheme, oriented. Like, they're doing something really unique that kind of, hey, we weren't expecting. We got to get to this area of the game plan for whatever reason. I think it's something I'm conscious of, like, hey, at the end of the day, I'm going to lean on where I think we can be successful, move the ball and score points, whether that's run oriented, as it was in the Chicago game, or pass oriented as it was in Miami, or Sunday against Seattle. I think that's more ebb and flow than it is like a hard, like, hey, here's where we're going, here's why we're doing it.
Why do you think Trey was able to be so effective? It seems like he just kept getting open. Was it this scheme? Was it him? Was it their defense?
A little bit of both. I mean, he's a very dynamic receiver. I think he's kind of coming into his own in terms of how to get himself open, versus different looks, understanding coverage, understanding what we're going to ask him to do. I think Kyler has a lot of trust in him, like, put it near him, and he's probably coming down with it type of player. And then I think the other reason you see kind of the yardage of the production is some of that run after catch is really impressive. His ability to make guys miss, to extend plays, to create hidden yardage in the passing game, I think, is real.
You think Cummington's on it then? Is that just something that comes with experience, like learning how to find the holes in the zone, is kind of how to get himself open? Like, what do you?
A little bit of the verse zone. I think a lot more of it's versus some man and match of using the physicality of using your body, getting yourself in position where you can, like, look, he's big, he's strong, he can lean on people, he can separate at the top of routes and create himself open even when necessarily the coverage wouldn't dictate that at times.
That first sack, the guy came off the left side untouched, second week in a row that's happened. I assume that that's a communication thing, and if so, why do you think that that's happened back-to-back weeks?
Yeah, it absolutely was a communication week. I think everyone is both those two in particular, a little different in terms of environment, what we're trying to do, who's communicating, where the error was. I'm not going to get into complete specifics, but ultimately when that stuff happens, it starts with me, and then the next guy I'll always talk to is the quarterback. Say, hey, me and you are responsible for protection. We got to make sure we're locked in.
Overall, I know there's been plays where you've highlighted the pre-snap communication's been really good. Overall, has that been where you wanted it to be this year, especially in recent weeks?
I think for the most part, certainly those are the types of plays you have to eliminate in games like that. And I think that was, one of my big messages, like, hey, there's plenty of good on tape, but in big games, those small number of errors can change the game. And I think those are the things we got to get cleaned up.
Back to Trey for a minute. How much of that was because of the way they were playing on defense, which was taking away some of the other things and created more of those opportunities?
I think that's certainly a part of it. I think they wanted to take away some other areas. I think also, I would think at this point in the season, they know that that's somewhere we want to get the ball as well. So I think it's that balance of they want it, that's the nice part about trying to be dynamic in different ways and with different players. So I think it's probably a combination of both.
Is it difficult to try and bounce back and try and get some more things done when you're going against a defense that is ranked up so high in so many categories this week, and with a coordinator that's kind of known to cause some confusion for offenses, let's say?
I wouldn't say it's any harder. I think it's hard because they're good at what they do and how they coach it and how they execute. I think that's the only part of it, regardless of what happened last week. Win, loss, or draw. Certainly it's a talented group. I think. I think of, as you said, his defenses over the past how many ever years he's been calling have been as good as any unit probably on the field. I'm really impressed with just the way they coach those guys, the versatility they have in terms of their roster. So I think that presents its challenges. I don't think that's related to anything that's happened prior to this game.
Obviously, I imagine there was more pressure than you guys were hoping for on Sunday, but also, a lot of times this season, Kyler's been really, really good under pressure, and it seemed like he wasn't quite able to create as much under pressure on Sunday. Well, was there a reason that you saw for why that was happening?
I think a number of things. I couldn't get guys open as quickly. Maybe wasn't quite as clean in some of our one-on-one matchups. Didn't win as quickly down the field. I think all of it, kind of all of it goes into when you see that type of pressure. It's a little bit of everything.
He seemed pretty effective when he moved the pocket. Why is that just consistently week in and week out he's able to make a defense? I don't want to say he's strong, but why is he able to make plays when he's passing arm and throwing?
I think it's his skill set is so warranted to that. I mean, what he can do. I mean, one, he can run away from you. Two, he can make plays with his arm out of the pocket. He can hurt you with his legs. He sees the field really well. He has the vision. Players understand kind of what he's thinking and where things are going. So I think it's a combination of a lot of those areas that you don't have to throw it. It might be a 10-yard or 15-yard run, which he's done throughout the year when he gets out of the pocket. So I think it's that kind of dual threat mentality that kind of creates a lot of issues for a defense.
From your perspective, what's the balance like of wanting him or getting him out to make him play, but also make the defense think this could happen on a consistent basis, but also kind of keep him back there and let him kind of...
I think it's exactly what you said. I mean, anytime you roll out, you shrink the field a little bit too. So there's the dynamic of, all right, hey, you've taken half the field away from them having to cover it. So it's finding that balance of marrying it to the run game, making sure you're still getting the ball to the guys you need to, getting him out of the pocket cleanly, which can always be an issue in the keeper game as well, in some of the run action game, and trying to make all of that look the same, of finding that balance to make it as hard as possible on the defense.
How hard is it as a play caller sometimes that if the run isn't working, just to stick with it?
I think every game's different. To me, it's a lot harder when both aren't working. Generally, if one of them's working, you have a direction. And I said that, seriously, if one's working, you're like, all right, I'm going to lean on it. I'm not going to abandon it, but I'm going to lean in one way for a little while. And then as you start to see that work, you hope it sets up the other areas. You can come back to it. So it's kind of a give and take throughout the game. But it's something we always want to be on first, second down. Specifically, we want to create indecision in which one we're going to do or why.
I wonder only because everyone talked about the 4th and 1. The interception, but prior to that, there was a 7-yard run on first down, and then couldn't get 3 yards on 2 running plays, which maybe the 4th and 1 doesn't even happen if you get a first down there.
It wouldn't have. Actually, that's a fact. But no, I think to your point, it's that balance of, sometimes we're going to run it 4 straight times, regardless of down distance. Other times we're going to try to mix it up so that they can't lock in and say, hey, in this situation they're going to pass, in that situation they're going to run. This is how we can tee off on some of their tendencies so that they have to defend both at all times and allow us to create some of the big plays we've been able to create. Unfortunately, in that situation we weren't able to.
When you got here 2 years ago, did you watch all of Kyler's plays in his career?
Yeah, so we went back and watched kind of throughout his years here, mostly in the NFL. You glance at some stuff he did in college here and there. But to get a feel of what he's comfortable with, what he's had run well, that's a huge part of getting to know him and trying to put the offense in to be the best version of him.
How have you seen him as a runner progress or evolve in 6 full seasons or 6 seasons?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think he's always done a good job of this, but I think he has a really good feel for when to turn it on, when to protect himself, when to get out of bounds, when to fight for the extra yards, because that's a real balance as a quarterback. I think you've seen that over the course of many guys' careers, specifically that position. If you take a lot of hits, it's hard to sustain. But if you're really dynamic at it, you also don't want to lose that ability or take that out of someone's hands. So his ability to understand that and do a nice job in that, I think, over the course of 6 years as he started to understand the NFL game has been really impressive.
One more follow to that. When did you see that kind of shift?
I would say it was probably, and I couldn't put a date on it, but I think it was something that probably happened before I got here as you start. It's almost something that happens I want to say year, and he'd be able to answer that better than me, but with a lot of guys, it's year 1, year 2, where they're like, oh, this feels a little different than it did in college when I carried the ball 8 to 10 times. Just by nature of the guys that are chasing you, their size, their speed, their strength, the field is smaller and it shrinks quicker.
On the fourth down play, the interception, when you went back and looked, do you feel like that play was there? I mean, I understand that Witherspoon cut him off, but obviously you have the option then to get it to Michael. So if the execution had been a little bit better, do you think that should have worked?
I always like. I mean, when I called it, I certainly thought that. Do I think he could have made it work? Yeah. Is there a world it was? Was it wide open and I had a great play call? No. Like that's also true. I think both those things can be true. Where it's like, and I would tell him that, like, hey, I probably could have called a better play. I think that's one I still expect you to make, and both things can be true. And I got to be better, and you got to be better, and we're going to be better. I think that's kind of the mindset when things like that happen.
Looking forward and going to a place like Minnesota where you and so much of this coaching staff got a big start. Does that mean something to you going back to a place like that?
It's cool. I mean, I know a lot of people in that organization. I love that city. I love a lot of people that work there and live there. And, I was there for 6 years. So there's certain element of excited to see certain people, love that. But at the end of the day, once the 60-minute clock starts, I really probably could care less.
What do you remember about a young JG, a young Nick, a young Rob Rodriguez?
Yeah, I think our love of the game, like that's where it was fostered. That was my second year in the NFL at that point when I got to that organization. It was the first time I ever met JG. It was Nick's first job in the NFL when he got there in, what was that, 2018 or 2017? So it was just, we were in a very similar situation in different roles where we talked a lot of football and spent a lot of time together, probably too much time together, talking football, working out, doing so many things together. So, it was a really cool experience. It helped me develop as a person, as a coach tremendously. So I'm really grateful for getting to know those guys and still being with them here today. So. Both, evidently, although there were a lot more surgeries than there were football knowledge being gained at that time for me. But no, it was a great place and a great experience, and I'm very lucky to have met those guys and been there.
Wow, what's the key to being successful in that building?
It's a number of things, but I think the things that we always stress, and it's very similar to what we dealt with last week, is locking in on the plan, like complete understanding of the game plan so that we, because I always say you might not hear everything in the huddle, you may not hear everything at the line of scrimmage, but if you really know what's going on or why we're doing things, you can fill in some of those gaps, you can make up so there's no lost time or space. But it's real. I mean, you got to be prepared for it. I think we've done a decent job of handling it. I think we need to continue to emphasize that to make sure it's a strength for us and not a weakness.
What do you see from their defense?
We talked about it a little bit. I think the versatility is probably the thing that shows up the most, which has always been true with the Brian Flores defense. So many guys can play so many different positions on that front and do it at a high level. I mean, I think they have 3 guys in the top 15 in sacks. Those guys are playing at the first level, the second level. They're playing inside. They're playing on the edge. They're walked. I think that what they do is very unique, and it's very impressive how they coach it, organize it, and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That was my question.
Is there a game record in there like Leonard Williams?
I think based on how they deploy it, it can be kind of anyone based on it's almost like the offensive version of, hey, getting the ball to your best players based on what the defense is doing. I think they do a really good job of that, and it makes them difficult.